Welcome to episode 4 of Climate, Trees, and Legacy. I'm Connie Barlow, and today is April 26th, and I'm standing next to Cupressus glabra, here in the bench above the floodplain of Oak Creek near Sedona. Today is June 11th, 2014, and 6 weeks since I recorded that in the field in Sedona, Arizona. I finally finished all my field work and all my online research for being able to produce and put together Climate, Trees, and Legacy, Episode 4, Lessons of Arizona Cypress. Now, it's been exactly 2 months since I put together Episode 3, Lessons of Joshua Tree, and so you might wonder, why has it taken this long? Well, part of it is that I got sidetracked by trying to do 2 trees at the same time. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is an emergent program starting in California. The first tree I actually knew I was going to do was Torrey Pine. I was familiar with that. And I very much knew that coming through eastern California and up a little into Nevada and coming down into western Arizona, I would be doing Joshua Tree, which was the 3rd episode, Lessons of Joshua Tree. Well, when I got to Prescott, Arizona, and then to Sedona, Arizona, I actually discovered a tree I was totally unfamiliar with and learned that it is really in need of assisted migration in this time of rapid climate change. It's in central Arizona. This is the Arizona Cypress. It goes by a number of species names, or it's the Arizona Cypress complex. It's one taxonomic classification. Its common name is smooth Arizona cypress, and there's another species or subspecies, depending on how you view it, to the south in southern Arizona and moving quite a ways down into Mexico, that is called normally the rough-barked Arizona cypress or a variety of such. Now, another reason why it's taken me so long to put this particular video blog together is that while I was in Prescott, Arizona, this is about the southwestern extent of the Arizona Cypress, smooth Arizona Cypress range in central Arizona. While I was in Prescott, I gave a talk there that was put together by a Prescott College professor and held in a bookstore, and gave it to a small group. So I had a very different tone there. I was talking to a group, very much advocacy in it. But you can see it on YouTube, and here's its title and how to find it. So again, this is episode 4 of Climate, Trees, and Legacy. It's Lessons of Arizona Cypress, and I'd like to start off showing you some short videos to give you a sense of what this beautiful tree is and what its seeds look like as well. We begin looking upstream at Oak Creek with the classic red rock structures of Sedona. There we're looking at a beautiful Arizona cypress, smooth bark to the left there, and one overhead. As we move to the top, you'll see the seed cases, the female cones there. Now here on another specimen, it's a close-up look at the branches bearing male cones. These are the tiny little brown ones. They've already released their pollen for the year. But on an outer branch, we can see 2 examples of female cones that would have developed the previous year. I'm not sure, it might take 2 years for these to develop. This is smooth Arizona cypress in Sedona, Arizona. And I'm carrying some examples with me. June 11th right now, I'm near Colorado Springs, into the Rocky Mountains near Pikes Peak, about 9,400 feet elevation here. I'm very fortunate to stay in the guest house of a friend. My husband Michael Dowd and I, as I mentioned in the first episode, are following pretty much along the route of the Great March for Climate Action. These marchers are walking 3,000 miles. They began March 1st walking 3,000 miles from Los Angeles, ultimately to Washington, D.C. This morning they left Colorado Springs. They had a climate rally there yesterday. In another 5 days, they'll be up to Denver, have another rally there, spend a few days in Denver, and then they'll be heading east. Now, before I get into the details and show you more video and more explanations about why Arizona Cypress is challenged by climate change, before I get into the details there, I'd like to present what's been happening in the news on public policy and cultural understandings about climate change. Since the time that I recorded and published Lesson 3 on Joshua Tree, and today. And there's been a lot that's happening. Part of the reason Michael and I decided to devote our lives this year to doing whatever we could to promote a better understanding of how real climate change is and what it means in the future. And my work, of course, is with helping Americans learn about the tremendous impacts for forest trees if we don't get climate under control by reducing our fossil fuels. But the reason we were doing this in 2014 is that we feel that this is the year. So let me go through some of the events that have happened in just the last 6 weeks since I reported on these issues. The foremost event, very sad, was that once April had ended, it was possible for the scientists to report how much the average carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was throughout the month. This was the first time that any month in human history has been 400 parts per million. Now, we actually reached it a year ago in May for a day or two. We climbed up over 400 parts per million, but that wasn't a monthly average. April this year is when it happened. From now on, it's going to keep going up. What we need to do is to try to make sure it doesn't go up too far. Now, last year I was the word is upset by the fact that 400 parts per million had been reached, is that I took quite a bit of time and put together a video blog that mashed together excerpts from my favorite women scientists who had just been publishing late the previous year and in the spring of 2013. So, as if 400 parts per million for perpetuity is not bad enough, in the last 6 weeks we also learned that the tropics are expanding poleward, both in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. The scientists published in the May 15th issue of Nature Journal, and the title is The Poleward Migration of the Location of Tropical Cyclone Maximum Intensity. And summary statement is this: over the past 30 years, the location where tropical cyclones reach maximum intensity has been shifting toward the poles in both the northern and southern hemispheres at a rate of about 35 miles per decade, or 1/2 a degree of latitude per decade. As tropical cyclones move into higher latitudes, some regions closer to the equator may experience reduced risk, while coastal populations and infrastructure poleward of the tropics may experience increased risk. All right, next, in the last 6 weeks, we've also discovered another horrifying piece of news reported to us by scientists. This had to do with the West Antarctic Ice Sheet. And you've probably heard of something called tipping points. And that is that change is gradual, and suddenly something happens, something that scientists really can't predict exactly when it's going to happen. But when it does, you know it. And afterwards, it's different. And to agree, a certain amount of climate change is also unstoppable. So with respect to the West Antarctic ice shelf, there were 2 different teams of scientists using different data points that both came to the same conclusion. And let me read you the title of one of those reports. The title is Widespread Rapid Grounding Line Retreat of Pine Island Thwaites, Smith, and Kohler Glaciers, West Antarctica, from 1992 to 2011, published in Geophysical Research Letters. The title of the other report is Marine Ice Sheet Collapse Potentially Underway for the Thwaites Glacier Basin, West Antarctica. A frightening word that they use in their reports is unstoppable. Now, that doesn't do anything for us here in Colorado, for example, but any coastal cities, the large ones that have embedded infrastructure, sure, not in this generation, but certainly by the end of the century, and then continuing on for centuries after that, it'll get to the point where all of those cities are drowned. Okay, so those were the scientific reports. That's what we're understanding about what physically is happening. What about the human response? What about public policy? Well, in the last 6 weeks, our own government in the USA has published the National Climate Assessment. And it's an interactive website that for the first time is really easy to use. And it's looking at things at a regional basis as well as overall. And in the introductory section, the first sentence is this: climate change, once considered an issue for a distant future, has moved firmly into the present. Okay, staying with what our own government in the United States is doing, there's an advisory board to the U.S. military, and this one is made up of 16 generals. And a number of years ago, I think it was 2007, they came out with a warning about what changing climate and the direction it's moving is going to mean for exacerbating the problems of conflict in the world and potential problems that the United States will get involved in one way or another. So I'd like to read to you a little bit about the news report published on this. Quite a few television stations and other media covered this report by the advisory panel of retired military officials. So here's one news report. A group of 16 retired 3-star and 4-star admirals and generals say climate change is now one of America's top security threats. This risk is marching on to a beat we're not in control of right now, said retired General Donald Hoffman. He continues, the American people have a responsibility to be educated on the issue. When you do get educated on the issue, you unquestionably will understand that climate change is real. The evidence is out there. Now, another general, retired General Gordon Sullivan, says this: speaking as a soldier, we never have 100% certainty. If you wait until you have 100% certainty, something bad is going to happen on the battlefield. Also here in the United States, but what actually resonated around the world, is where we see science coming together with the best artistic and technological ability to present it. And that is that there was a remake of Cosmos, the one that was initially put together by Carl Sagan and ran in 1980. I watched it at that time, and it really stunned the world, and many of us have watched it quite a bit since then. Well, Carl Sagan's widow, Anne Druyan, who was also one of the scriptwriters for that original Cosmos series, recruited Neil deGrasse Tyson to play the same charismatic role that Carl had played. And with today's issues and today's understanding of the cosmos applied right here on Earth. 13-part series, and it just ended 3 days ago. So I'd like to show you a little media event where Neil deGrasse Tyson is quoted very strong in several of the episodes, taking on climate change, basically saying there is absolutely profound evidence that it's occurring. Denial, we are past that. Let's get over it. Let's get on with managing it. So here's what he said. We are dumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere at a rate the Earth hasn't seen since the great climate catastrophes of the past. the ones that led to mass extinctions. We just can't seem to break our addiction to the kinds of fuel that will bring back the climate last seen by the dinosaurs, a climate that will drown our coastal cities and wreak havoc on the environment and our ability to feed ourselves. All the while, the glorious sun pours immaculate, free energy down upon us, more than we will ever need. Why can't we summon the ingenuity and courage of the generations that came before us? The dinosaurs never saw that asteroid coming. What's our excuse? Now, on the helpful side of the human response, there was a group at the State University of New York that put out an excellent interactive website in which you can take a survey, and they're looking for the people who have an understanding of particular life forms, particular plant and animal species, to take the survey. And what you're going through is to ascertain to what extent does this life form need a little help moving north from us, that they can't go fast enough. And what are the consequences of that? Are there any social or economic barriers to that taking place? And we at Torreya Guardians, Torreya taxifolia is the conifer, endangered conifer. We moved from northern Florida to North Carolina beginning in 2008. Several of us were contacted and we filled in the survey. So we're grateful for having had an opportunity to do that. It's not just the scientists speaking to one another, but there's a lot of activists, conservationists, and others who have ideas to input. Along those lines, one of the things that I've been using in my field work is that I've discovered that conservation biologists, well, the journals that I'm accustomed to reading in conservation biology and environmental sciences, have been pretty much behind the times. They've been arguing about whether assisted migration should happen pretty much in the abstract, while managers of our national forests and our state forests are moving ahead with looking species by species at what their individual needs are, both in Canada, the United States, and Mexico as well. That's what I know about here in North America. And so the good news is that for citizen activists like myself, we now can consult scientific documents available to us to read. I've also started speaking directly to several of the lead foresters themselves, the researchers. These aren't the boots on the ground people dealing with fires and pine beetles, but the ones who are using climate models and ascertaining where a particular species is going to need to go, by when, and what are the physiographic obstacles that might get in its way. So that's good news. That's good news in the human response. Okay, time for a brief section on anything new I've learned along the way of previous species that I've covered in the past. What have I learned about Joshua Tree? What have I learned about Trolley Pine since those episodes? Well, while we were in Flagstaff, a forester came up to me, a private forester came up to me, and he mentioned that the drought in California is such that the landscape trees of Torrey Pines that I was so enthusiastic about, that is that the San Diegoans and people in LA love their Torrey Pine so much that they were planting it in their yards and their parks and so forth. I said, they're not going to survive. And the reason is this. Take a look at what a Torrey Pine looks like without any supplemental watering. That is where it's just along the coast, California and the chaparral, and all it gets is whatever rain comes and a lot of fog. That fog's really important. Note the shape that it takes. Not too high for capillary action to have to take water too high up into the heights of the tree, and a lot of breadth to it to capture the vapors in the air and turn them into rain coming down right underneath it. Well, in contrast, take a look at the Torrey Pines right around this condo development in San Diego. You give them water, and hey, the sky's the limit. Look how high they go. Once a tree takes on a form that works well with the conditions in its environment, it can't necessarily backtrack, particularly if it assumes it's always going to get a lot of water. Pine trees are not capable of letting their tops or a limb here and there die off. the whole things will go down. So I'm no longer enthusiastic about just waiting it out and letting San Diegoans play with their Torrey Pines. It's probably a good idea for people in the know to start seeking out places further north along the coast as climate will shift, to begin moving wild stalks of Torrey Pine. Now, what about Joshua Tree? Well, what I'm always looking for is whether anyone outside of the range of a species actually is successfully planting it in their yard. So while I was in Sedona studying Arizona Cypress trees, I was wandering around a neighborhood, and look who I saw here. Yes, that's a Joshua tree. Arizona Cypress. Let's move on with it. Let's begin before we take a little video tour of where Arizona Cypress lives and its conditions and what it looks like and its associates. Let me just outline the 4 lessons that I think I've come to about climate change, about the need for human assistance of forestry species during a time of rapid climate change. These are the 4 lessons I've come to, and I'll deal with each of them in detail after we take the video tour. So here they are. Lesson 1. The landscaping business could accomplish no-cost assisted migration. Number 2. Species with disjunct populations have special needs. How taxonomic lumpers versus splitters affect conservation views. And finally, the enormous difference between natural and human rates of climate change. Let's begin the photo and video tour of my experiences with Arizona smooth cypress in Sedona. Now, I'm always interested in people's yards and the kinds of vegetation that they choose for landscaping, especially the trees. So very early on, when my husband Michael Dowd was giving a sermon at a local church, I walked around the neighborhood. And here's what it looked like from a distance from the church. You can see the characteristic rocks of Sedona. But when I got into the neighborhood, I took a picture of a tall yucca. That's not a Joshua tree there. It's a tall yucca. And in the right background, you can see what I now know is an Arizona cypress. I went up closely and I looked at it. The next thing that happened is that early on we took a small walk out of Wash towards the pass between Thunder Mountain and Chimney Rock. And on the way back, I noticed this blue-gray, beautiful little tree. And I knew it wasn't a juniper, but I knew it was a relative of juniper. It'd be in the Cupressaceae family. And I just thought it was a landscaping tree, similar to the one that I had just seen in the other neighborhood, that had escaped. Maybe this was an invasive species. So I decided afterwards that I would go and try to find where in the neighborhood this tree had come from. I saw a house behind it, but there wasn't anything, no other cypresses there. So I walked a little ways back down the street and I saw a whole line of them there. Smooth Arizona cypresses. Just gorgeous. So I thought I really had found an invasive species. Now, I wasn't particularly concerned about it because, number one, it was a beautiful tree. It didn't seem to be displacing any of the native trees, taking over. But I was just curious about it. So we were planning on going on a hike with Dennis Andres, a.k.a. Mr. Sedona. And I told him about my experience with the tree, and he just went, "It's a native! It's a native! There's a trail here called Arizona Cypress." And we eventually found that it was native. I was just looking up the wrong variety of the Cupressus clan. So here is Mr. Sedona, and here you're going to hear him talk about Arizona Cypress, smooth Arizona Cypress. and you'll hear his attachment to it as a native species.
My name is Dennis Andres. I've been an outdoor guide in Sedona and sites around the world for about 18 years, and most of all an avid hiker here in Sedona. And so the Arizona Cypress is one of my favorite trees, and in my experience of it, it's quite a common tree actually. After juniper and pinyon pine, this would be the tree I'd most often expect to see in the forests around Sedona. In my years as a guide, I would often talk to people about expectations of seeing cypresses in Florida and swampy places where cypresses can live 1,000 years or more, and how unique it would be to think of a cypress adapting to such a dry terrain around here. And that's another reason I think people here love cypresses, because they have become a drought-tolerant tree, and obviously that's something that's very valuable in times like these when there's so much less moisture than there once was. Even in the 18 years that I've been in Sedona, seeing the change being dramatic. Now in springtime, I'm talking to you in late April, thinking about the potential for forest fire again this summer. This is a tree that I hope will make it through. Arizona cypresses have been known to live up to 800 years, which also makes it a special tree. And lastly, I would say that my experience of the tree in this area, we are now on the Mescal Trail in the Dry Creek Basin. In the same area off the Secret Canyon tree, there are many very tall Arizona cypresses that extend back closer towards the west side of Sedona through the Soldiers Pass Trail, that beautiful canyon there, and then others in the uptown area leading into the Oak Creek Canyon. So that's my thoughts about the Arizona cypress tree.
Now, toward the end, he put the Arizona cypress in its larger context, something I wasn't aware of at the time. He talked about how evolutionarily it's really a moisture-loving clan, Cupressus. And I was aware of bald cypress in Florida and going points north. I've even seen bald cypress near the Hudson River as far north as north of New York City. So I was aware of that form of cypress, but it's a different genus name. This one, Cupressus, is the cypress that we have here in the Arizona desert. And so I did look up online afterwards, and by golly, Mr. Sedona was right. The evolutionary history of this is fascinating. Started out as a moisture-loving plant long, long ago, and it's also related to the sequoia tree. Now, the smooth Arizona cypresses that Mr. Sedona took us to first along the Mescal Trail are good examples of both upland and then along dry washes where there's some water going underground many parts of the year. But a really spectacular place to go was the second place that Mr. Sedona took us, and that was on the opposite side of the Oak Creek near Red Rock Crossing. And there you can see how splendid not only the Arizona cypresses are, but there's also cottonwoods and there's even sycamores back there as well. Now, a sign that this was really a healthy environment, this bench above the narrow floodplain of Oak Creek, was that you could see young Arizona cypresses too. In fact, there was quite a multi-age group of Arizona cypresses. Here's a closer look at one of the larger ones, its base. You can see the beautiful smooth bark, and also, when it's not having to compete with any other trees, how it keeps its branches spreading low as well as topping high. That concludes our brief tour of smooth Arizona cypress, where it's found in the northern part of its range, Sedona, Arizona. Now, the point of all this is to take some lessons from it, some of which may be applicable to other species around North America. So let's take a look at the 4 that I outlined at the beginning. Let's start with lesson one, the fact that the landscaping business could accomplish no-cost assisted migration. Now, this is really important. We Torreya Guardians have demonstrated that a group of dedicated individuals using a little bit of money of their own are capable of making a small assisted migration project. But in order for these trees to really have a go of it, as climate changes, we're going to need a bigger cadre of people involved in it. Now, the logical thing, I think, what the Forestry Service and what conservation biologists are thinking is that it would be somehow the government paying for it, taxpayers ultimately paying for it. Given that I don't see our economy really recovering back to the go-go days of the 90s, I think the budget's going to get tighter and tighter. And so it would behoove the professionals to find a way to work with citizens. And think about it. Landscape architects, nurseries that sell plants, these would be the logical go-betweens between the professionals and the citizens. All that needs to be done is for the landscape architecture profession to see the opportunity to take the professional articles. Let's start with the trees. Let's start with what the Forest Service is telling us. They've already done so much. As you'll see in the episodes that follow, there's already so much that landscape architects could do in translating what the forestry researchers have produced and then sorting out what would be the guidelines for seed stock, trying to make them as wild as possible. None of this sort of, well, let's genetically engineer them so they can be more beautiful. No, keep the wild stock and advise the landowners about how much watering or not needs to be done. And then see how much landowners will be thrilled to feel that they can do something for the future generations, future of the forests, something real. This is going to be especially important because private individuals who plant nursery stock, nurseries themselves, and even landscape architects have come under a lot of criticism for the role they've played in spreading invasive species, non-native species from other continents into North America in places where they just go wild and overtake the native stock. This would be a way for the landscape architects and the nurseries and private homeowners to redeem themselves. So, what about smooth Arizona Cypress? Well, you see, it's already being sold in a number of nurseries. Check it out online. Here's what I found. Here's the prices. Here's where you can purchase it. They might call it names like Blue Ice or Carolina Sapphire, but it's basically smooth Arizona Cypress. And here's a map that shows where Arizona cypress can grow far beyond its range, as you see. This is sort of standard practice for nurseries. Doesn't matter where the native range of something is. They test out where can these plants grow. They do it by plant zones. And so you see from this map, there's a lot of opportunity in the current climate. But we're not interested in planting all around in the current climate. Where things are very similar to how they are now in Prescott or Payson or Sedona, Arizona. What we're looking for is where these trees are going to have to go next. And the U.S. Forest Service and others are giving us maps of where these trees are likely going to need to be if the climate keeps changing as expected. 2030, 2060, 2090. So let's take a look at that for smooth Arizona cypress. In this first map that I'm showing you, the top left quadrant is the current range of Arizona cypress, and the reddest color is actually the place where it does the best. Other shades into the blue range and the yellow, it doesn't do quite as well under today's climate. And you can see that this is where you actually find it. Now in 2030, that's not that far away. This is 2014. Take a look at where the foresters think the habitable zone for this tree is going to be. It starts to get less and less adapted to its current range. You see there's blue zones in there. And it starts getting better adapted north of the Grand Canyon. Moving down to 2060 and into 2090, it actually gets up into southwestern Colorado, the Durango area. So Durango residents ought to start thinking about what that might mean for them when they're choosing trees to plant. Okay, so this tree needs to leap across the Grand Canyon in about 50 years, maybe sooner. How's it going to get there? Well, let's take a look at how it would be able to do it, or how far it can possibly get if humans aren't involved in helping it. Let's take a look at its seed. Let's take a look at its potential for seed dispersal. First, we'll take a look at what the seeds look in the wild. And I've chosen a couple of videos here to show you how older generations of seed cases hang on and hang on and hang on. The dark ones are the ones from previous years. I read recently that they can last easily on the branches even beyond 15 years holding on there. I haven't seen whether the seeds are still viable. But this is a kind of fruiting body that really confuses me. Remember from the Joshua tree episode we had where I distinguished dehiscent and indehiscent. Dehiscent is when the capsule opens up to allow the seeds either to be taken by a bird, a rodent, or the wind. Indehiscent is when they just stay right there. Now, there's some forms of indehiscent, like lodgepole pine and jack pine in particular, that don't open up the cones to show their seeds, apparently because they're waiting for heat. They're waiting for fire. No sense putting your babies out there if it's a full forest. So they wait for the older trees to die, and then the cones pop open, and you've got a new crop. Some of the literature looks at Arizona Cypress this way, as if it's called serotinous. That is, that it needs fire. It stays together until fire. I'm not so sure about that. I see little cracks forming in them, not in the first year, but it looks to me like a little bird could actually get its beak in there and take out the seeds. It's certainly not windblown. It's certainly going to need some help moving. And even if a fire comes, it's just going to reseed in the same spot. So who can serve as the disperser? Who can serve as the disperser here? Who did in the past? We don't know. Well, I decided to do a crazy little experiment here. You'll see, follow the videos and you'll see what I'm doing, just to learn a little bit more about how difficult it is to open those seed cases. Okay, I've got 2 Arizona Cypress seeds on the cement there. And I've got a husband here in his hiking boots who's just going to, the first thing, he's just going to sort of walk on there, not try to step hard, but we're just going to see if somebody walking on those seeds will actually open them up. Okay, Michael, start the experiment. Okay, what do we have? Nothing. Okay. All right, so try to, like, smash. Anything happen?
Yeah, that opened up.
Oh, let's see. Oh, yeah. Okay.
So if I hit it hard, it opens up and then there's seeds.
Okay, good. Okay, I just put 3 Arizona smoothbark cypress seed cases in front of the tire, and what's interesting, notice there's already a rock lodged in the tire. These are new tires. They only have a couple 100 miles on it, so good tread. Let's see if cars are capable of dispersing Arizona cypress. Okay, here's the ones he just ran over twice. You can see the goo oozing out of them. And look at this one here right in the front. Has a nice red seed associated with it. Here's an addendum. We noticed an oil leak after I stopped filming, and so we were walking around, Michael in his boots, to open the hood here. Notice where there you can see the green stain in the center where one of the cypress seed cases used to be. His boots knocked it all the way over to here, and a piece of it right down to there. Now look at along the edge here. See all those red seeds? Now, there's a little bit of gravel in there too, but here's the red seeds. So boots are quite capable of dispersing this seed. Okay, sure. Boots can move it a few feet, but that's not going to get it across the Grand Canyon. I think we can see from this little experiment, and certainly from what I've read in the literature, this is no cottonwood. This is no willow. This is no Siberian elm. It's not going to be dispersed naturally, certainly not as fast as climate is changing. So what can we do? What can we do? That's where I suggest what's come to be called assisted migration. Forest Service sometimes calls it facilitated migration. Some of the conservation biologists call it assisted colonization, managed relocation, whatever your name for it. It's humans getting involved. And my dream is that we don't have to spend taxpayer money. In fact, if we don't have to spend taxpayer money, that's going to mean that citizens, no matter how depressing things get in the economy, climate change, or whatever, there's something virtually anyone can do. With the help of your local nursery, who will have been informed by the professional landscape architecture and forestry professions, they will be able to help citizens decide to plant trees beyond their beauty in this lifetime, but for centuries to come. Now, for any of you who are already fond of Arizona Cypress and you're concerned about how far it's going to have to move north, I'd like to show you that there's a cousin of our Arizona Cypress called Paiutes Cypress that exists east of Bakersfield, California, over in the southern Sierras. Take a look at where it is now. Again, red signifies that that's really good range for it. Blue, not so good. Yellow, even less than that. Take a look at where it's going to be in 2030 on the very slim eastern side of the Sierras. And then by 2060, it's going to need to get up to just south of the Columbia River. Now that's a very semi-arid area there. It's called the Dalles, Oregon. Just think about it. By 2060, to move from the southern Sierras all the way up to the Columbia River. What are we doing? What are we doing to Earth? What are we doing to the climate? So that concludes lesson number 1. The landscaping business could accomplish no-cost assisted migration. Let's take a look at lesson 2, the special needs of species with disjunct populations. Well, as you've already seen on the map, the Arizona Cypress, and in fact that's the reason I chose it, in addition to being in Sedona, but anything that's going to have particular trouble, and in fact if we don't get involved, will go extinct. A disjunct population is something that has little populations spread out, but not a vast range, and certainly not a way to maintain genetic connection over time. So they're the ones that we tend to be most concerned about. We can certainly see it on the map that it's worthy of our concern. But this gets us into point 3. Lesson number 3 is how taxonomic lumpers versus splitters affect conservation views. Taxonomic lumpers versus splitters. For as long as taxonomy has existed, there have been people who would prefer at the species level to combine a number of subspecies, populations, and so forth, and call it one large, wide-ranging species with a lot of diversity, with a lot of potential there to be able to interbreed. Other people, if a species is disjunct, that is, it has distinct populations, and certainly if one group of nested populations are widely dispersed from another group, let's say, the Arizona smooth cypress from the Arizona rough cypress, and both of them from the Paiutes Cypress in the Sierras. There are people who would call those each a separate species. Now, it's shifted over time. That's why it's called the Arizona Cypress complex. Some people call it all Cupressus arizonica, and then the varieties have the other names. It seems to be now that there tend to be called separate species. But what that means is that for citizens and conservationists, it's really easy to think that when you're dealing with isolated species, you've got to keep them isolated, that there's something wrong about allowing their ranges to come back together. Actually, what I've been learning from the foresters is that it's the reverse. When you think about it, during the previous glacial periods, every time that the glaciers came south and the continent cooled, you would have the plants that had been living in the mountains moving down, down, down slope, and eventually they'd meet each other out in the valleys and in the basins, in the basin and range habitat, and they would interbreed for a while. And then an interglacial would come, that is a warming, and you would have the species start to separate again, or the populations start to separate and go back up the mountains again. And then eventually they would be isolated. They wouldn't be interbreeding anymore. If humans were not on Earth, we would very soon, or rather planet Earth very soon, would likely be entering another glacial period. We certainly would not have brought up the carbon dioxide here on planet Earth beyond about 280 parts per million. That's where it was before the Industrial Revolution, where we started burning coal and oil and so forth. So those plants would still be hanging out, and then they could expect another glacial period to come in, and then they would be able to move down the mountains and then back in the basins, and they'd interbreed and get all their population going again and then be ready for the next interglacial. We don't have that anymore, and that's a reason that we need human intervention. But just because we've chosen to call the Arizona smooth cypress and the Arizona rough cypress and the Paiutes Cypress different names doesn't mean that we can't bring them together if that's what's necessary in order to preserve the genotypes, to keep them from winking out. So that's a situation about how taxonomic lumpers and splitters can affect our kind of knee-jerk reaction as conservationists. And so we have to become a little bit more thoughtful about what species or varieties really mean. Let's take a look at Lesson 4. Lesson 4 is about the enormous difference between the natural and human rates of climate change. Now, I think this is the most difficult thing for people to realize. I mean, when we think about sea level, we think, oh, well, all we have to do is change the infrastructure and we've got 2 generations to do that. No, it doesn't work that way for plants. It certainly doesn't work that way for trees. Let me remind you of the IPCC chart that came out end of March that I showed you in the previous episode on Joshua Tree. This is very important. Take a look at the chart. And again, what do you see? You see how fast different kinds of life forms can move. The higher the bar, the taller the bar, the faster it can move. Obviously, there aren't any birds represented on there because unless you're flightless, you can go anywhere. Take a look at what the slowest moving life form is. It's our trees. Okay. So, given that trees move so slowly, we realize that even in this century, we're going to have to move things. But I'd like to call to your attention to how different this is from times in the past. I mean, we all know Earth has been through major transformations of climate in the past. But let me read you a passage from a particular paper that will give you a sense of paleoecologists and geologists when they're talking about a fast rate, what they're saying. Here's a paper that was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2012. The key sentences are this. Global climate underwent dramatic changes about 33.7 million years ago when a warm and almost universally equable world rapidly became much colder and drier. This shift is attributed in part to a dramatic decrease in atmospheric CO2 that caused global mean temperatures to drop 3 to 4 degrees C in only 300,000 years. 3 to 4 degrees Celsius in only 300,000 years. We're talking now a best case scenario of 2 degrees Celsius, kind of accepting it's probably going to get up 3 degrees Celsius global warming on an average temperature by the end of the century, possibly 4. That's in 100 years. Paleoecologists call it rapid, if it's in 300,000 years. And that simply reflects how long it takes for the life forms to move and to adapt to their new circumstances and their new set of biological associates that they find themselves living with. This is scary. I'm not going to end this lesson with bad news entirely. The good news is that we have scientists who are already and will continue to help us understand how and when and where we need to move all the vulnerable species. I think with the help of citizens like myself, like so many others I've met traveling on the road, we will be able to do it. In the meantime, in addition to all this adaptation that we need to do for forestry trees, we certainly need to keep moving ahead on mitigation, lowering the amount of fossil fuels that we're using, getting it down to the point where we're no longer adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere from fossil fuels. And then ultimately, the ability of the oceans to take that carbon dioxide dissolved in their water, combine it with calcium, and turn it into limestone is going to be able to bring back the atmospheric carbon dioxide down to a reasonable rate. That will take millennia, though, and so it's our responsibility to do what we can do now. So that's it for Lesson 4 of Climate, Trees, and Legacy, Lessons of Arizona Cypress. This is Connie Barlow from the Front Range of Colorado.